Good day, my name is Sky, and I appreciate you spending some study time with me. I'm here to help you make money in online poker by teaching you key strategies and getting you to take action. So let's talk about facing donk bets today. I'm going to help you figure out what your opponents are donk betting with. So please whip out that poker journal.
Excuse me while I whip this out.
And visit the show notes page, smartpokerstudy.com/pod531 to help you take notes. Let's talk about facing those donk bets and figuring out what they donk bet with. Gambate!
Alrighty then.
Now the donk bet, D-O-N-K bet, well, the donk bet is made out of position into the pre-flop raiser, and that effectively preempts their c-bet on any street. So you were the pre-flop raiser, the flop hits, they're out of position, but they bet instead of checking to you. Now, of course, if you c-bet flop, they can donk into you on the turn. If you c-bet flop and turn, they can donk into you on the river. Now, the donk bet is a play that confuses many players, myself included sometimes, I'll admit it, because it seems that donk bets can really be made for any reason, by any opponent, and for any size. So how do we figure out what these bets mean? Quite often, donk bets are blocking bets that are made by players who hold a draw or a weak one pair hand. They don't want to check and then call a larger bet, maybe a 50 or 75% pot C bet that you might make. So instead of check calling, they lead out for one big blind or 1/4 pot, with the goal of setting their own price to see the next street. Or because they usually have a weak hand or a weak draw, if you fold, awesome, cheap bluff for them. So here's a hand example for you. You have pocket sixes on the button. You open raise, and a tight yet passive player defends out of the big blind. The pot on the flop is 6.5 big blinds, and the flop comes down 4, 7, 3 rainbow. You have pocket sixes. Now the big blind player donk bets, instead of checking to the c-better, he donk bets 2 big blinds into the 6.5 big blind pot. And because you have pocket sixes on the 4, 7, 3, got a gut shot, some showdown equity, plus you have position, you just call him. Now on the turn, 10.5 big blind pot, the queen of spades hits, putting a spade flush draw out there, and the board is queen, 7, 4, 3. With 2 spades, you have pocket sixes still. And he fires the donk bet again. 2 big blinds into the 10.5 big blind pot. And because you still have that gut shot and you have showdown equity, he doesn't have to hit a queen here. You decide to just call. The river comes an ace of diamonds, so the flush doesn't get there. But the final board is 4, 7, 3, queen, ace. The river pot, 14.5 big blinds. You still have your pocket sixes. And now the big blind villain, after donking flop and turn for just 2 big blinds, now he checks to you. So you decide to check back with your showdown-worthy hand, and he turns over pocket deuces. So this was a less than 1/3 donk bet on the flop, and it was obviously a weak hand. It was the worst pocket pair, deuces, on the 4, 7, 3 queen ace. And we saw this coming because of the size of that bet and the actual play of donking that he made. We knew he was weak. We had a bluff catching hand, so we bluff caught on flop and turn, and we probably would have called a small bet on the river as well. Now you can imagine if the big blind had flopped something much stronger, like a set of 3s on the 4, 7, 3, or maybe he turned a flush draw with the second queen of spades, or if he even had top pair, like king queen. He would have bet more than 2 big blinds on the turn to get value from hero on the button. Now sometimes donk bets can also be made for value and also like for protection on scary boards when a player flops a strong hand, but they don't want their opponent to check behind and catch a winning turn card. Here's an example of this value/protection bet. Under the gun limps. The next player ISO raises just to 2 big blinds. Hero calls on the button with king-queen offsuit. The big blind called, and then the limper called as well. So it's 4-way, you're in position, but the MP player was the raiser to only 2 big blinds. Feels like weakness right there as well, right? So the pot on the flop is 8.4 big blinds, and a 7-8-5 comes out. And the first player to act, the big blind, Donk bets 6.4 into that over 8 big blind pot. Roughly 3/4 pot. So that board, 7-8-5 rainbow, it's a wet middle card board, and he's making this donk bet 3/4 pot versus 3 other players. What do you think he's making this bet with? Is it the pocket deuces like we saw in the prior hand? Probably not, because many players play kind of straightforward in multi-way pots from out of position. This big 3/4 pot donk bet feels like a value bet with like 2 pair or better, and he's probably concerned 7-8-5 is connected. There's a straight possible, or at least a straight draw possible. He wants to charge any players. He doesn't want to check and let everybody check behind and get a free turn card to beat his 7-8 2 pair, his set of fives, whatever he might have on the 7-8-5. But for some reason, Hero decided to call the 3/4 pot bet. The other 2 players folded, but Hero had the king, queen, 2 overcards. Maybe he knew something about this villain, was hoping he was bluffing right here, and maybe saw an opportunity to bluff him later. But Hero called with the king, queen offsuit. Then turn came a deuce of spades, making the board deuce 7-8-5. The big blind player donk bet again for 3/4 pot, and Hero just called on that turn. Imagine that, 7-8-5 deuce, actually rainbow, no flush draws possible. Hero has just a king, queen, and then called again. I do not like that turn call. On the river, a king hits, making the final board 7-8-5 deuce king. The big blind player finally checked, and the Hero, after he hit top pair, maybe he wised up to his mistake on the flop and turn calling those 2 donk bets. He just checked back right there in a 72 big blind pot, and ended up losing to 8-5 offsuit. He flopped 2 pair on the 7-8-5, double-barreled big. And it makes sense. Those big double barrels was trying to protect from those straight draws beating his 2 pair. This is what I want you to think about in-game as you're playing. This is going to help you make a read on a player's donk bet. So you want to think about their player type. So weak players, they often bluff with donk bets. But competent players, they use them to put you off of your game and confuse you. Also think about the donk bet size. The larger that size is, the more likely they're doing it for value. And consider their preflop range and how it interacts with the board. If they have plenty of draws and weak pairs possible, it's likely a blocking bet, especially if it's on the smaller side. And think about your history with your opponent, your HUD stats, the hands you've got to showdown against them, or the hands that you've seen them get to showdown with. And look for frequent donk bettors. If you're playing live, you can notice this and pick up on it, through observation in-game. But if you're playing online, you've got a HUD, like the Smart HUD for Poker Tracker 4. Please use it. Pay attention to their donk bet stats. Whenever somebody donk bets into you, open up the pop-up, see how often they do it on the flop, on the turn, or on the river. That's going to help you make a read. Are they doing this as a bluff or doing it for value? Or like I said, that protection bet with that 8-5 on the 7-8-5, worried about future straight cards. Now also during your study time, if you're an online player with the database of hands in Poker Tracker 4, you can learn a lot from donk bets when you face them with those hands in your database. So run a filter in Poker Tracker 4. There's 2 parts to this filter. Part 1 is a raise donk bet opportunity. And also add to the filter saw showdown. 2 parts to it right there. Now if you're looking at a pretty extensive database, go through and review 30 hands. And I recommend break this up by position. Do 6 hands from the big blind through the button. By focusing on these 30 showdown hands, you're going to be able to answer the question, what did they have when they donk bet, and what was their sizing? What type of player were they, and what was their donk flop statistic at the time? The goal with this is to spot patterns to the donk bets that you face. You whipped out your poker journal for this episode right now, so whip it out once again. Take notes in your journal on whatever you find out about your opponent's donk betting so that you can use this information the next time you face a donk bet. All right, thank you so much for listening today. And once again, go to the show notes page, smartpokerstudy.com/pod531 to help you take notes with everything you learned in this episode. And I didn't mention it before, there are some screenshots for the hands I went through in the episode. Thanks for listening, and until next time, take action both on and off the felt to become the player that you want to be.